if you really believe and trust that you're going to grow as a business and the new things that we haven't encountered yet that we're going to encounter in the future, that a new flower may grow between one of us and have to take on a new challenge just to make the business continue to prosper. So it's being patient and ever-changing expectations and things that need to thrive.
On this episode of A Call to Leadership, we take a hard look at the problems leaders face in business partnerships. Many of them fail right before our eyes. And honestly, it can be a huge headache and a responsibility navigating through the trials of having business partners. So I've invited a packed house studio with 3 guests who have shown exemplary leadership in building their thriving company. My friends and clients, Jim Vizcarra, Matt de Miranda, and Brian Scott of Stride Staffing, to give us the tools we need to win as leaders in this very important space. What's up, guys? Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here on this episode of A Call to Leadership. I wanted to bring you guys on because you 3 have been such an interesting partnership. I work with a lot of clients, and you are actually a partnership that works for the most part, right? I'm sure you'll get into trouble along the way. But I wanted to unpack your relationship as business owners, your move to being a business owner, and also your industry, working in the staffing industry. Lots of questions, lots of concerns, lots of uncertainty right now. And I think our audience will really be blessed and informed by some of your takeaways. Glad to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So let's start with the beginning. How did you 3 even connect to become partners in business?
Well, we all 3 worked together for many years at our old employer, another local IT staffing company. And throughout that time frame, became personal friends. Those relationships strengthened over what I would say time, and obviously incentive trips. We'd have a lot of incentive trips we'd hit with our old employer. We'd have a lot of time together for a week, but ultimately just...
So during these trips, would you kind of vision cast and daydream about what you can do on your own?
I'd say the trips were part of it, but a lot, the happy hours after work, the analogy I've heard many times, I've heard Brian say, the business that started on a napkin at a bar. I mean, it became through, I guess, a vision of what it could be if we did this without, reporting to other people and just did it on our own. I mean, we knew the trade and we knew the recipe for success. And then it just kind of, over time, how much could we talk about it before Jim drew the line in the sand and put a date out there that said we're either going to do this or we're not, which I think was probably the first, stepping stone to actually making that as a date and a real objective and a real, it's go time or it's not. And it grew from there. So was this your idea or was it all 3 of your ideas? Brian, where were you at with this?
I don't remember one of us specifically. I think it just came out of, we're all athletes. We all like golf. So we just had a lot of common interests together. And I think just literally in brainstorming, I think the idea just kind of came up and it just trickled from there and grew stronger and stronger over a couple year period of time. So I don't recall one person necessarily driving it more than anybody. I think we all had the same kind of common vision and it all strengthened equally over time that this is something we needed to do.
That's good. So, and I've talked with you about this before, and our audience would know this, that most businesses fail, and it's even greater of a failure when it's partnerships, because generally partnerships, I've been an officiant, if you will, for many partnerships along the way, right? People come in, they say, Nate, we need to form an S Corp or an LLC, and we're all excited because the future is bright, and it's basically like a wedding ceremony. But oftentimes, once you move into the same house and you start realizing, oh crap, Maybe there were some different ideas about our expectations, about our vision, about our lack of communication that caused issues. Most partnerships fail. And not only that, there's a lot of other reasons too, as far as timing, as far as preparation. You said this is like a 2-year journey. I love that, because sometimes you'll have a conversation and then like 3 weeks later, be like, hey, we're going to go out on our own. It's like, whoa, slow down. There's a lot of work to be done on the front end. What kind of preparation did you 3 take for that 2-year journey to get ready to go out on your own?
I mean, for me, I expected, let me back up before that. So I came into our previous employer after Jim and Brian, and it's a timing thing in this industry when you go work for a staffing company. And once you establish, you build up a bullpen of candidates, you build up a sales territory. That first 2 to 3 years is when you really load up and jump off that spring and go. I was 2 and 3 years behind Jim and Brian. So and then, through that window of time also, we had, the recession in 2009. So I was kind of stagnant as Jim and Brian had experienced a lot of growth. By the time I caught up to them and we talked about, hey, let's start this business, they had purchased nice homes. They had started families before me. I was right on that cusp of like, okay, our family is growing. We're ready to expand and grow. So I was just kind of getting a taste of success working for somebody else and seeing the rewards in my paycheck, and the money was better. So for me, being prepared, it was like, if we're going to do this, like I feel like I've just gone through the battles of making ends meet to finally making some money to have to go back and do that again. So we saved money. I saved money and saved money and saved money to be prepared for the worst, which from the day of that first note on the napkin to the day we walked in our office and gave notice and quit collectively as a trio, that was about a 5-year or so time frame of prep. So not only from a what's in my bank account prep, but mentally, Jim's a bulldog and he's got a bulldog mindset, and we all have different things that complement this relationship. Jim is like, I'm never going to lose kind of guy. And I'm always the, what if we do lose kind of guy, So for me, it was a lot of reading and a lot of audibles and stuff with driving to gather information about entrepreneurship and, those challenges and stuff that we're going to face, and picked up little things here and there that resonated with me. To keep me motivated. So not only was it from I'm putting money in a way that my family and I are still financially stable if things don't work, but also keeping my mind in the right standpoint of there's going to be hard times. I'm going to need to be patient, and things are going to have to come together to prepare mentally, not only from a banking standpoint and a financial standpoint, but a mental preparation for the hard things that are going to be ahead of us.
Yeah. That's great that you actually took time to read, like you said, even the audibles, listening, preparing your mind, because it's a huge shift, to move from a paycheck to building something on your own, plus
to no paycheck,
plus doing it when you have a family. I mean, you're already, middle age, right? So when I started, I was in my early 20s. I had no responsibilities except for going to Aldi and getting my ramen and my bread from there, right? But then when I got married, it's like, oh crap. Now I have to make sure that there's stability, and so that's a challenge even when it's just you. But now you've got a whole family. But Jim, you came from an entrepreneurial family.
Yes.
And so did that affect this trajectory when you're talking about, Matt talking about you being a bulldog? Is that part of that ethos that you have?
Yeah, I think so a little bit. Having some of that in my family, growing up, didn't always have a whole lot of money. So for me personally, it was always just wanting what you never had growing up, from a motivational standpoint.
How would you classify like your childhood as far as like entrepreneurial? Would you classify the peers that you had as hustlers? Would you classify them as students of the trade? How would you identify that?
All the above.
Yeah.
Honestly. Just because my stepdad is how I think you and I initially connected, because my sister worked for him. And, seeing that, and, my dad had his own business here and there with selling granite, did well, then failed, so I've seen a little bit of everything, I guess, at that point, career, high school into college. But
Did that give you cautions? Did that tell you some of that experience, say, okay, this is what I don't want to do if and when I have my own company? Because you've got a very specific outlook on business. Would you guys agree with that? As far as Jim has a very specific outline on money and timing and things like that. Is that something that you learned the hard way, or something that you saw, well, this is something that I think will work? If
when we first started having the discussions, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm too optimistic. Knowing us three and our qualities and how good we became at our craft, I personally never thought we'd not make it. I know Matt will say differently, but that's just, I guess that's a little subtle different, differences in our personality. But I don't know. I think I just use it as just motivation to where we're not going to fail. I don't know if that's good or bad, but luckily I got two great partners and where we're at today.
What about you, Brian?
So my upbringing is actually quite a bit the opposite between my father and my two brothers. All three of them worked for Fortune 100 companies their entire career. And I've been the first employee of two companies, started as an entrepreneur in another business, and then this is my second entrepreneurial effort. And it's just always been in my blood to, the way I always look at it is I want to be paid what I'm worth, not have somebody else value what I'm worth. So just that concept of, if I build it, I'll be rewarded for it. So where it comes from, my dad worked for Purina for 40 plus years, and my oldest brother for State Farm for 25 years, and my middle brother, Edward Jones, for 20 plus years. And there's nothing wrong with that. They have wonderful careers and supported their families and will retire happily and have, it's great. It just was never in the cards for me. At our former employer, I was the first employee, and was there 15 years and walked in with no furniture, no idea of what the industry was. But there were three kind of like us, pretty sharp guys that I felt like were headed on a good trajectory. And I said, let's go. And I really had no idea what I was getting into before getting into IT staffing. And, like Jim said, I think when you have the motivation and the drive and the intelligence and track record of winning, you're more inclined to continue to win.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I would say I was quite as confident as Jim was, but, I had a pretty good feeling that we would do well.
So why did you do it? I mean, we do business for many, many reasons, right? But to leave the comfort and the security and possibly the potential, right? Because your potential to grow, to, as you said, save your money, begin to go on a trajectory of enduring many hardships. Why?
I'll jump in on this one. So for me, we're all in sales, so we're motivated by money. That's the staffing industry is solely a hustle and run that hamster wheel and try to make as much money as you can. But that hamster wheel, as soon as you slow down, so does your income. So money is always a big motivator of starting a business. But when you get down into the nitty gritty of just because you want to make a lot of money doesn't mean it makes sense to start a business. So I think you have to kind of how I relate to like a good songwriter. They probably had to been through something to come up with cool lyrics or write a cool song, or, they had to been through something to make something beautiful. Me personally, our last place we were at, I'd been through something. I was at a point where, right, wrong, or indifferent, I was ready to make a change, whether it was because you didn't feel appreciated, you didn't feel like it was enough, it wasn't fulfilling, there wasn't a lack of growth. Many of those little things that pile up, that build up, push you to the wall, push you to the line that you're just right there, and there's enough things that are just not right that you're like, is this it? Is this what I worked so hard for? Is this the end? Am I going to do this forever? And it gets you right to that point, and then you get Jim and Brian to pull you on the arm and say, let's go, So I think you got to kind of go through something that I'll say now that I'm thankful for feeling, call it underappreciated or undervalued or not enough opportunity. All those things that I was mad about, I'm thankful because that's what motivated us to jump, So you got to kind of go through something to be ready to do something different and make a change. So either accept it and deal with it and complain. My wife was tired of hearing me complain all the time. I know. So are my friends. So are these guys. Or you do something about it, you make a change. And not knowing where that's going to go is the risk of starting a business. But I think we're fortunate that we're surpassed 3 years now, and the trajectory is looking quite good. So we're happy. So thank you for all those people along the way to piss me off.
Yeah, some pain, right? When the pain is great enough to make the change, does it hurt enough? And sometimes pain you can look at it 2 ways: the pain of my current context, or the pain of not realizing my future context. And really, those are two different kinds of pains, but they both motivate. And even once you get to a certain point to where you realize that, as far as the entrepreneurial plight, when you realize, I can do this, can you ever imagine going back?
No way.
Impossible.
Everybody told us, Matt and I had lunch with a few entrepreneurs along the way just to kind of stress test our idea, right? Say, hey, are we crazy? Is this? And they're like, it'll be the best decision you ever made. And the one question you will ask yourself is, why didn't I do this sooner? And we all look at ourselves and say, God, I wish we'd have done this a little sooner, right? Not a doubt in our mind, that it was the right decision, and we wish we would have pulled the trigger a long time ago.
Mm. Yeah. So your motivation, would you guys say similar motivations, or would you have different motivations you'd touch on?
Everything they both said, and, now I guess looking back on it, feeling like that we've made it, which I feel like we can say that, now where we're at and where we're going, providing that opportunity that we were all given from a company where Brian and Matt and I started at similar size, maybe not as early. Brian was first employee, but, we look back now and I walk in on Monday mornings and we've got 5 employees in our office with tremendous opportunity. And looking back, and we can say, we built this. We're creating opportunity for other people. To me, that's just as exciting as saying we've made it.
It's huge.
I mean, it's really cool.
It's huge.
I think for me, it's a culmination of, and none of them are epic, huge moments. It's all those little things that we learn of how to do it the right way, right? But then all those little things that were like, oh, if we did it, we would do it this way. We would change these little things to make our environment and our culture and our growth and just how we operate, call it arrogance, call it whatever you want, better. We felt like we could do it a little bit better. There's staffing is staffing, but there's the little nuances and the little tweaks and turns and how you go about your day that separate the good from the great. Yeah. And we feel like we have that equation, maybe not on lockdown. There's always things you learn every day, but we feel like we have the base of it really solid, and are going to continue to build upon it. And so it was a combination of, there's some little things I wish would be done different, but it's also that just, I feel like I can do it better.
Yeah. Well,
and reap the rewards.
Yeah.
To be honest, of doing it better. And
so when I was working on my MBA, I boiled down my entire educational experience and all the money it cost into 3 words: do it better. I mean, literally my entire master's degree could have been boiled down into those 3 words. Yeah, there's a lot of other things involved, but that's what we do. And it's and that's also part of the leadership journey, is because we see that there's a problem in the way business is done, whether it's a product or a service that's being offered. And we realize that we can be a part of that solution in a fresh new way. And that's also motivating when you know that you have solutions to solve problems in new ways that other people haven't. And that's also exciting. That's innovation, right? Innovation doesn't need to be disruptive. It doesn't need to be, something that changes everything. It could just be incremental ideas that ultimately create a better experience for all the potential stakeholders you have. And I think that's part of what you're saying, is that you could see that you could be a part of a greater opportunity to solve problems in fresh new ways. But of course, that's great in like theory, right? It's great when you're at happy hour or golfing. By the way, who's the best golfer between the three of you? Who's a crash golfer?
I'm not raising my hand.
Depends on who's healthy.
Brian's hurt, so I'll take the crown.
Matt wins. Maybe you guys will take me out sometime. I'll just drive the cart. Anyway, so we have this great idea, and this is where I want to kind of hang out for just a little bit, because you've got people, some of our audience is listening, and maybe they want to make a transition, and they hear you talking about the preparation, a couple of years, saving, preparing for this sort of desert journey that you're about to have before you get to the oasis, right? Before you get to the place where you are today, walking through those 3 years, and also the dynamic, right? There's probably been times where you guys have had maybe some expectations haven't been met. Maybe some communication was lacking. Maybe the vision got a little bit faulty sometime or another, right? Let's dig into some of the challenges that you faced along the way, because I know it's not all roses.
Oh.
Who wants to start? Like, matter of fact, there's something going on right now. No, but seriously, where do you start?
I think it was, when we all started, Brian was out of what we would say production, where we're like FaceTime with clients and so forth. And Jim had kind of migrated that way too. Like he was kind of in a hybrid role, partially managing, which was outside of St. Louis in a different city, and selling. And then, I was full-time selling, still in the weeds. So as this all comes together, it's just kind of figuring out like, how do these puzzle pieces come together, and where do we all kind of interconnect? And I think there was challenges in figuring out like, where do we all fit in the food chain here, and how do we make this thing go? Because we all kind of have a similar knowledge base, similar experiences, and the same journey, in the same room, in the same company. So there wasn't a lot of like, hey, I got an idea, we did it differently here or there. It was all the same. So it was figuring out where we pick in on things such as like, the accounting and the benefits, and setting up a bank account and a credit card and a website and marketing, and all these different things that come outside of just what we know in our box of staffing, and figuring out who's going to fill these roles and what they're going to do and how it's going to come together. And I think we're all kind of surprised that, where all those chips settle and who ends up wearing these hats. Because I was fortunate that I had very warm relationships when our non-compete expired that I was able to jump back into. That didn't take a great deal of, some did, some didn't take a great deal of work to reestablish those relationships and networks and allow that business to come in. So where that kept me occupied, so that was my time, was pretty much selling a lot of the time. And, and Jim jumped into a lot of our back office stuff, which I didn't know if it was going to be me. I hoped it didn't have to be me. I thought maybe Brian had some experience in that and he might do more of that stuff. But Jim, I think we can both say, kind of blew us away with his ability to be organized and run with that, and how he kind of filled that spot. And
it happened, but
and he just kind of has managed that piece of it. And Brian has, handled a lot of the recruiting for us and handled that piece of it. That I've always known Brian as a sales guy since I met him when we started working together 12 years before we started the business. So we all kind of fell in, and I don't think that me being the last guy in the food chain, as I mentioned earlier, with these guys both being sales and directors, and then me being the lead salesperson, I was more afraid going into this that I was going to be the underperformer, where my accounts happen to be warm and hot now. And it all just you figure out where you go. So I think to get back to your question, the challenge is just, where does it kind of where do we all fall into place to where we can have enough coverage to work in the business and on the business and still march forward, you know? So it took time to figure out where we all kind of fit best and how we, you know, help this thing move forward.
Yeah. I mean, I can go back to a singular moment that was, very tough, but also, I would kind of say shaped who we are. You know, coming into Stride, you know, we all knew I had another business and my wife stays at home with our kids and I coach all their sports teams. And it's an understatement to say I was significantly overcommitted in just relationship to time. And, it was in August of was that the first year or second year? I don't remember exactly. I should remember it, but you know, I think as a partnership, we had a really hard conversation about, you know, we need more of, and specifically me, right? I was very humbled. We need more of your time. You're overcommitted. And for this to be successful, we all three have to be pulling our fair share. And, you know, at the time was upset, mad, hurt, like, you know, trying to comprehend I'm doing all these things for all these people, but they were right. They're like, we committed to each other and our families and our business. You got to pull your weight. And so to have, you know, after digesting it and coming to the realization that they're absolutely right, it only made me appreciate them more, that we have that relationship and that bond and that trust to have hard, honest communication with each other of, hey, for this to be successful, here are the expectations and here's what we have to do to get there. And if you're not, we're going to call you out on it. Right. And so for me, that was a pretty pivotal, can't say that word, pivotal moment of, you know, trying to conquer everything all at once versus being a little more narrow and focused was what was needed, you know? And so from that standpoint, I could see where other businesses would crash and burn because it would create animosity and fighting. And with us, I think it only strengthened who we are versus turning it into a disaster.
Yeah, that was a crucial conversation. And it's important that you share that, because if someone is producing, like bringing money in, right? And then someone else is doing whatever, the fair share, right? And then there's an equity piece that you start to really consider, like, does everyone have the same skin in the game based on what the expectations were? And you're right, because if you don't have that crucial conversation, what happens? You start to build resentment. You start to have animosity. You start to think, maybe this just isn't working out, right? How did you guys approach that? I mean, obviously, you two, Jim and Matt, had to have a conversation at some point, I'm sure, and say, hey, look, you know, how do we approach this with Brian so that we can make sure we're all rowing in the same direction?
Well, I think what made it harder to approach it was because of our friendship. You know, our wives are, as much as we can see each other with all young kids and don't live super close, but I mean, we were good buddies before we started this. Our wives were friends. And so that alone makes it tough to even bring up, you know, but
because you care about each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And we came into this together. We all have the right expectation. We've never done this before. So in terms of like, I remember when we first started, we never set like, this is your role in the company. This is yours. Things just like Matt said, just kind of fell into place, you know, and then how do you broach a subject when it's needed? So it wasn't easy, obviously, but you know, when we had this discussion, it's, you know, this is our livelihoods. We put equal investment in all of each other's livelihoods. Not only do we owe it to ourselves, but our wives and our kids, you know, so yeah, it wasn't easy.
Huge sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we all three have sacrificed a ton financially, time, you know, a lot.
Do you think that since you had that conversation, that you are closer now, that you've been able to like let it all out and say, look, we got to stay true?
We were all pretty close out of the gates, and I think that's kind of also like complements why we would feel comfortable. And I would expect the same from these guys if I wasn't, whatever the case may be. I think we're all comfortable enough that we got this kind of a team mindset of, pick someone up when they're down or kick them in the butt when they need it. And we embrace that. And it's kind of like Brian, the analogy of being former athletes and stuff. Like it's water on the bridge and off we go again. I mean, it's let's go for it. I think we all collectively have the big picture in mind, and it's embraced.
Yeah, that's a lot of maturity that goes into that, and I love that. I love the idea of giving each other permission to call each other out when we are not committed to what we signed up for. And I think it also creates an atmosphere to where, communication is essential in business, right? As soon as and not only business, all relationships, like whether it's a marriage, whether it's parenting, whether it's in a community, a nation, whatever it is, every relationship hinges on clear and accessible communication. And communication isn't belittling. It's not talking down to someone. It's an exchange. It's an exchange of ideas. And so when we can share those ideas and say in a partnership, whether again, whatever kind of partnership it is, we can communicate effectively and then have the maturity to say, okay, you know what? I did drop the ball here, or I disagree, right? And have those conversations. Look, there may be some situations to where you may come in fire and you're like, well, here's some of the background to that, and let's talk about how we can move forward. But I think that's how a healthy partnership really continues to move in the right direction. And I say that because so many don't. So many don't. They're fractured, they're contentious, and they eventually fizzle out and they die. And it's sad because you see such great potential, but with the three of you, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you guys join me for this conversation, because someone's listening now who doesn't have that, mm-hmm. who is struggling to have those kind of conversations, is struggling to set the right expectations. And you were actually very fortunate that you did not have to lay out a lot of ground rules in terms of who's doing what, but some can't function that way. And I'm sure you knew what each person was capable of, but I also love how you pivoted, right? You changed roles in some capacity based on where you found your genius zone, and taking ownership of that. That's important too. If you had a word of caution for the team that's forming right now to create a partnership, what would you say as far as if you could go back and start over, and what would you say? Here's a word of caution for you, or here's what I would recommend that you do that maybe you didn't do when you first started.
Well, before you ask that question, one thing I wanted to add is I think what made us so successful, or what has made us successful to this point, and why there were, at least I had zero hesitation to start it, was because I trusted these guys. So for me, trustworthy, however you want to phrase it, is first and foremost. I trusted that I'm going to leave a very lucrative job to not have any income for at least a year and get to where, at the time we didn't know where, but where we're at now, and continue to grow. So for me, that's, if you're going to have more than any partner, you gotta trust them.
Mm. You guys feel the same way?
The word that resonates with me through this whole journey, and I could probably say this for a lot of different questions you would ask me, is patience, which came from one of the books I read. But, I think as a relationship would mature with a friend or with your spouse, and as a business matures, roles in that business might change. So, I don't want to feel like the punching bag on this, because when we started out, it was Jim and I had the warmer client base, So it was easier at our disposal to grab these clients and stuff where Brian had been out of production. Brian offers a tremendous value in coaching and teaching and training and bringing new hires on that I don't think I really want to do, that Jim doesn't really want to do. And he is far better at that than I will or ever want to be. And as we've matured, that's a bigger need now. We have 5 employees, and he's been paramount in helping it. So I think patience applies to that because the landscape has changed from it has, 6 months ago to 18 months ago to 2 years ago. Everything has changed. And like the characteristics and traits that we have are still being exposed in ways that we still didn't expect. I think initially I was expected Brian to be a good coach and mentor and teacher, but that's a big valuable piece for us now. That wasn't even offered an opportunity to be there because it was just the 3 of us banging on each other and whatever. But now that we've grown and we have more people, there's more opportunity for these things to come out and flourish. So being patient, and if you really believe and trust that you're going to grow as a business and the new things that we haven't encountered yet that we're going to encounter in the future, that a new flower may grow between one of us and have to take on a new challenge just to make the business continue to prosper. So it's being patient and ever-changing expectations and things that need to thrive.
Yeah, I would say looking back, the value of positivity, and kind of goes along with what Matt said of, celebrating small victories, right? Every victory is not equal in size and magnitude, but you have to celebrate them because along the way, there's a lot of negative thoughts that can come into your mind and stress and, just losses, right? You get told no after no after no after no as you're starting. Like for the last 15 years, we've all been uber successful and things have started to come easy. And when you start over, you humble yourself and you go back to the beginning and it's back to a lot of no's and trying to get there. So celebrate the little victories, humble yourself, allow that time. If you continue to be persistent and do things the way you've done them, it will come. But, sometimes it's in the first 6 months, sometimes it's 18 months, sometimes it's 2 years. You don't know. So, negative thoughts in your own mind can damage all of your motivation and all of your persistence and everything that needs to be there to be successful. So, and that's where these guys in the partnership, grabbing a lunch here and there and talking, grabbing a beer out at a happy hour, playing around a golf and just celebrating, hey, we did this week. This is awesome. Maybe we're not here yet, but this is good. We're trending, and just continuing to excite and motivate and push each other. That's one of the things I would, as a new business, tell people to just be mindful of, that, if you don't sign the big deal day one, it will come. You just have to stay positive and fight through it. So
that's good. Small victories build courage. And I'm a huge believer in how we continue to move forward. I agree. I can't agree more with the just in the moment. We're so focused on the destination that we sometimes we forget the journey, right? And that small victory that you celebrate, it's like, I tend to look at it like it's a symphony. Your business is like a symphony your whole life. And you get to be the maestro. And with every great crescendo of sound, it's a moment to celebrate that in this amazing journey that you are on, as well as all of your stakeholders are on. I did want to touch on what you had said, because I think it's so powerful. All those 3 pieces. One, the trust. Trustworthiness is essential to a relationship working in the long run, any relationship. So if you've ever heard of Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, way back in the day, he suggested that trust was built on 2 pillars. One is competence, right? You're all superstars, right? You know how to do the work. You know how to do it right. And the other is character, doing the right thing for the right reasons, having moral fiber, integrity. And he said that trust is built on those two pillars. There's a lot of other pieces to trust as well, but that's the foundation of it. And if you could think about your own relationship, I'm sure that you would say, yes, I trust these guys because they have high level of competence and they have a high level of character. And we can walk through any challenge together because of that. And you got to ask those hard questions when you're even getting into a partnership. Because if one is off, it's just not going to work. And I don't just tell you that out of theory. It's because I've seen it time and time again. For every marriage that I've instituted, an LLC I formed, right? About 40 to 70% of one partner comes back and say, we need a dissolution. We need to wind up.
Wow.
And generally, one of those two reasons is the culprit. Now, there are other factors too, lots of factors. Life happens, right? Changes and things like that. But the other piece is what you said about patience, right? Having the patience to see it out and wait it out and give it time to develop as far as your own understanding, not just jump in and attack, but understand that things take time to grow, right? It's a seed, and a seed has to germinate, and it has to be nourished, and it has to be protected, and eventually it grows into a plant, then it eventually grows into something that bears good fruit, right? And it just takes a lot of patience for that to happen. And often takes, you tell me what you think, more patience than you think you need in the first place. I mean, you're into 3 years, you might have thought, well, this is probably our spot, but there's probably some times along the way you're like, well, you know what? We could take an extra distribution, but, right? We need to continue to nourish this fruit-bearing plant so that it'll bear even more fruit.
Yes. So we've invested, we hired 5 people in the last, how many months? 12, 18?
Will's anniversary, our first employee's 1-year anniversary is on May 17th.
Yeah. So
2 weeks from now.
5 internal employees and however many consultants that are working out in the field for us. But in terms of our internal staff, we've invested in that. And within the last, it's, you talk about ROI. I mean, in the last 14 months, 12 months, since we hired our first employee to now, the growth has been 400%, 300%. I don't know. It's all due to reinvesting in people that we are. And I try to part of my journey and my motivation to start a company. I want to make sure everyone that ever works for me knows that I'm extremely appreciative of them coming to work, listening to my opinions and my structure and my thoughts on how to be successful in their job, and coming in and doing it for us. They're working for us, which is still to me like it's hard to really conceive that, I guess, in some regards, but investing in us and not taking that distribution and plans we have in the future for occupying new office space and whether we lease or we buy, and keeping that money where it belongs and not necessarily our pockets, so we can continue to reinvest and have a cool work environment, and and to build on our culture, and to attract more people to come work for us, and as a fun, cool place with a good culture, and young hungry talent that want to work hard and want to get into a commission and sales based world, and provide the best gamut of an opportunity and environment that we can offer. So that distribution piece is a big part of that.
Indeed.
It's huge. So
Yeah.
I have nothing to compare it to, but I'd absolutely say we're pretty conservative with that, and have been to date for those reasons.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, from an accountant's perspective, and it's tempting, right? I mean, not only that, but I've seen so many entrepreneurs, as soon as they make a little bit of money, they go out and they buy the fancy car and they upgrade the house and all this other stuff. And I'm sure, let's just call it what it is. I'm sure there's pressures at home. Hey, when are we going to actually start to make money? I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm.
These are real conversations, right? You're like, well, we are, but we can't access it right now because we're building a business. Like, well, what about that cool vacation we need to take? Or what about the the bathroom remodel or whatever it is?
Yep.
Yeah, and I feel that restraint, because I think we can be candid in saying the first 12 months of our business, we didn't take any money out. We left everything back in there for when we need to
14
start.
months, our first distribution.
But who's counting?
Right. You know, in our business, we have to have money to pay contractors, and some of these companies want to pay us back in 30, 60, or 90 days, you know, on payment. So you have to develop a pretty big bucket of money to start paying people. And unless you have that, you can't ever get off the ground. So we had to just leave it in there. So there was funds to take in that first year, 14 months, but it was not an advantageous play to do that. So we leave it there, and then it slowly builds. And we had a successful day. We're on the golf course, and we get a call that we get a placement, a start that we call it in our world. And then we got another one right after that. And it was just like, oh my gosh, you know, it's happening. And that was just the absolute very beginning, you know. It's been awesome.
Yeah, and I would say, and I don't know that I had any expectation going into it, but the money side of it has been, when we talk about how much and what to distribute and our plans, I feel like it's a very short, concise, we're all lock and step, you know, leave it in the company, build the company, hire more employees, make sure we're conservative. You know, the best and worst thing that can happen to you early in a business is to hire a whole bunch of contractors and then not get paid for 60 days and not have money to pay them, right? It's good because you have people that are out making money, but if you can't pay them, it all crumbles. So to have that foundation set up, and it's, you know, call it whatever, we all are very lock and step in that same conservative mindset of don't rob the business for, you know, that short-term gratification. Look at the longer-term, bigger picture, and it's working, and will continue to work out well if we can, you know, all hold to that.
Yeah. So one caution, it's what I'm hearing is don't overcompensate yourself when you need to reinvest in the business. Don't take the instant gratification as alluring as it is, because it is when you start to see money in the bank account and you've been struggling. It's very enticing, but you've got to resist. You've got to resist, because if you reinvest, it's only going to continue to plus it's exponentially more stressful when you've gone out and you bought stuff and now you can't pay your bills. I mean, that's a reality for a lot of businesses, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You could have a downturn, and then what? I've got no surplus to cover it, right? Those are real problems. Interestingly, Walt Disney shared your philosophy about conservatism in terms of his cash out to him and his brother Roy. They reinvested just about everything back into Disney, and one reason he wanted to have the best possible production, the best possible experience. So he wanted to have all of the best possible opportunities. The other is he hated paying taxes. And he knew that if I just keep reinvesting in the company, then I won't have to pay taxes on the money because I'm spending it in the company. I mean, he hated taxes, which most entrepreneurs do. So we all share that. Yep. And then secondly, it's interesting you even bring that up about instant gratification. There was a study done years ago. It was what we call a longitudinal study over a long period of time with kids. And basically, and you might have heard of this, or some of our audience might have heard of this study, there were two groups. One group they both had the option to take one piece of candy today or two pieces tomorrow. And both groups were followed through their lives. And the group who took one piece of candy had much different life outcomes than the group who waited and was patient to take the two.
Patience.
Right? And optimism, right? And trust that candy would be there in 2 days, right? Well, what do you think happened? What do you think happened with the group who wanted the instant gratification and took it? What do you think happened to them? What do you think their finances were like later?
Probably a lot of credit card debt.
Barely make ends meet.
Exactly. They had their finances were in shambles. They were they were job hopping and a lot of issues with consistency. The group who had the two pieces of candy had more stability, more longevity, more success ultimately in life. And now, the question is, can you teach your kids to wait? I think the answer is yes. I think you can, but you have to vision cast for them too. Say, this is a life trajectory for you. This is a game changer for you in your life. And I say that because we all have kids, right? And it's just interesting to think about it. You're probably thinking about your own kids right now. Like, okay, which kid would take the one and which would take the two?
Yep.
But that speaks volumes to how we operate in business as well. And I wanted to hang out here for a while, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to, because you've managed that process exquisitely, and many don't. So kudos to you for that. But I'd like to take the time now to transition, because you're in the staffing business. And this last 2 years with the pandemic has been unimaginable in the staffing industry. So I'd like to peel back a couple layers and just get some wisdom from you guys for employers out there who are struggling. I mean, I hear it every single day. Oh, it's so difficult to find people. I was just on the phone with a friend last night who is responsible is in the trucking industry and a dispatcher. And so people walking out in the middle of the day and acting and having to assume multiple roles, not only to dispatch, but also to actually drive the trucks as well, and the stress levels and the pressure and what is going on? I mean, some people say, oh, the Great Resignation is just because people are getting unemployment checks. But I think it's much deeper than that. What are you seeing?
It's a loaded question.
I'll say that IT is going to be a lot different than someone driving a truck, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. Where people in IT are typically, the CS degrees. They're calling on us to bring them people to solve complex problems that they don't have the means or resources to go find. So they use a staffing firm, whether it be Stride or one of our competitors, to go through and investigate all these people and find this diamond in the rough candidate that can come help them solve their problems. So, it's incredibly challenging. It's incredibly saturated. And in IT, though, we've all been in the business now for 15, 16, 20 years. I mean, almost we're approaching 50 plus years collectively here. IT has always been that way. We've been through the recession in 2009 that I mentioned earlier. The peaks and valleys are there, but IT just never really seems to hit the bottom like other industries do. Technology drives everything. The guys that are driving trucks are using technology for their shipments and where they're coming and going. And, while they're having a hard time finding someone to maybe drive that vehicle, someone in IT is writing software to help improve their process of shipping and receiving and logistics and all that.
One of his best clients is in
that space. So, IT is a resilient industry from a staffing perspective. There's always needs. I mean, there's somewhere, I hate to put a number on it, be way off, but something like 3 million plus openings in the country right now for IT. It might be way more than that, but it's in high demand. So we're always needed, and to be in a saturated market that is, we have so many competitors. Goes back to kind of the pillars of trust. We're successful because we have a long history of working with the same customers that we've established trust with, that allow us to be successful. Because I would hate to start this not having those relationships. We experienced that in our non-compete, whenever we went to engineering and mechanical engineering, and we went in accounting and finance and sales and marketing and all these things. We thought, hey, we know staffing. We can go jump in and do this. But without those relationships, it was tough. So I might have gotten off track there a little bit. But
No, that's good.
I think there's and I've done this 18 years, from the days of printing out resumes and hand delivering and to going paperless to now automated systems and artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I think everything has evolved drastically. And then you add in COVID and the evolution of people being trusted to do their job from home is just exponentially thrown a wrench in how employers need to think about hiring. The ones who've embraced it and gotten good at it are winning. The ones who are behind and aren't able to keep up with the changes are struggling mightily. And there's a lot of them right in the middle that do some things good and other things not good. But we've had to completely reinvent how we recruit. You know, back several years ago, St. Louis jobs were for St. Louis people. And maybe there was an occasional relocation here or there throughout the course of a year. And if you looked at our roster of people that work for us on client side, I bet there's 20 different states represented. You know, it's a complete paradigm shift of how we operate. So you have to be willing and able to recognize that just because we used to do it this way doesn't mean we need to do it that way in the future because it's not working, and evolve. The one constant that has remained throughout all of that is relationships. And to build on Matt's point of trust, you build that trust by having a good relationship, whether it's with the job seeker or the employer. And when you have that, a lot of things remain similar. There's just some nuances that are different.
So looking back, I guess where things have changed a lot, at least on the staffing side, there's been some really good positive and some not so positive. You know, the good things is that I could say is some of our clients have said, you know what, we don't need people locally in St. Louis. We'll hire them. We know developers can write code from anywhere. So that's made it, I guess, easier for us in a sense because our net to cast is so much bigger. You know, on the negative side, you've got these candidates who know they're these developers. I'll just keep referencing developers. They're in such high demand. You know, if they know they're good, the ball's in their court. They can look for the most money, the latest technology, whatever, right? Whatever is the main driver for them to look for a new job. Well, it makes it harder for us to place that person. It makes it even harder for our client to hire that person. You know, and then on the flip side, you've got clients that are kind of still set in their archaic ways of, let's say, interviewing. It takes them 2-3 weeks to interview someone and make a decision. In today's market, you might as well not even talk to the person. The developer's gone in 2 days if they're really, really marketing themselves or working with, let's say, 3 staffing firms.
Yeah, they're interviewing 5 companies. You can't drag your feet.
And some companies will do a 2-hour interview, a Zoom meeting with you and say, you know what, you're everything we need. We've teched you out. You're in our price range. Offer. We've got some companies that takes 4 or 5 interviews and whatever else, background check, personality assessments. You know, again, it takes 3 to 4 weeks from start to finish. You're going to come in last every time. So, you know, our service is free, obviously, until placement is made, but it goes from our time invested with our client, our time invested with our recruitment team, our recruitment team's time invested with our candidate. So, I mean, there's many, many people involved in this. We'd consider a simple hiring process, right? You know, to get to start to finish. So the landscape has been turned upside down. You look back on it pre-COVID, you're just like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And
really
the unique thing about, you know, the IT space too, though, is, you know, the standard method of hiring is a right to hire or contract to hire, where they bring in someone as a contractor for 6 months. And then if they like them, they evaluate them, they're a good cultural fit, all the intangibles are there. The candidate also likes the culture and it's a long-term fit. Then at the end of that 6 months, they might say, hey, let's make a long-term decision here in partnership as a W-2. They hire them as their full-time employee. So to kind of add on to Jim's point is, you know, some of those steps are necessary in making a long-term commitment. But when you have the ability to be so, you know, agile with things, where if you bring in a contract to hire and that person doesn't work out because of who knows why, their cat died and now they're depressed and they can't come to work. I mean, we've seen everything happen, literally, then, hey, this isn't going to be the right long-term fit for us. So some of those steps in our eyes from a staffing perspective could maybe be jumped over that are readdressed after that 6-month period. And then you can say, hey, let's do the other necessary checks and balances and make the long-term commitment, because we don't create the rules. The world of staffing has created it, and the demand for people has created it. And you just got to move quick, to really seal up the people you want.
Yeah, those are all really good points, because as I think about what you're saying, I think about in the past where we would do one interview and then we would possibly try to hire somebody, and then conventional wisdom changed, said, no, you've got to do 3, 4, 5, because that's how you really get to know people. And they've got to be really long interviews, because once people start getting comfortable, then you start to understand who they really are. And then, of course, you've got to have all these personality assessments. And then, of course, you've got to have all these skill assessments and all of this, right? Because that's the way you hire for duration. But what you're saying is some of that conventional wisdom is actually being flipped upside down. And that's changing the way people perceive how we hire people today, post-pandemic, in a world where it is very difficult, not just your frontline employee, but professionals as well, to get them to the table. I mean, and then, of course, you have employer issues too, right? Because they don't get it either, right? Whether or not they show up to a Zoom interview, right? Does that ever happen?
Sure, it's happened.
It's happened.
Well, and I've actually had over the last, I'd say 6-7 months, 2 different clients just reach out to me and say, hey, be honest with us. Is our interview process consistent with most, because things have changed. And I'll never, ever tell any one of my clients how to interview or what. Just my only advice is usually just condense it and expedite it if you can. Sometimes you do need to change it a little bit, just again, because you're looking for the same person that everyone else in the country is looking for. And when you find that right person, like, you got to move. It's we say it till we're blue in the face, but it's so competitive. And like I said, that such a high demand for these talented, especially the good ones, the A players in the IT field. They know they're good. They know they're marketable. They know they're going to get above market rate and everything else. So it's, to the client, what's your story? Are you going to sell yourself on that candidate to take your job?
Yeah.
Outside of probably having to compete with 2 or 3 other offers that candidate has in hand after 2 days of interviewing.
That's something.
That's just reality.
How things have changed in the hiring process too is, that the employer has been, they've always been in the driver's seat of, we're going to pick between these 5 candidates. And if we offer them, you can maybe assume that they'll always accept. But it's like we're going in now, as we do a lot of preparation with our candidates before they go into these interviews. Hey, you need to make sure you've been on their website. You need to make sure you've done your due diligence and get prepared and have questions and all these things. Where now I'm making phone calls to the hiring managers and the employers and saying, hey, you got to file an interview with Dave. He's talking to 5 companies and you're in like 3rd place. So you're going to have to go in and sell him that this is a good opportunity and why he should accept your job. So instead of them interviewing 5 candidates, now they're interviewing 2 or 3, and the candidates are interviewing all these other places. So now it's like on the employer, like, why should he or she want to work for you? And you better be prepared to sell, because at this point it's changed. So if you want them, you better come and play ball.
Especially if they're A players. And if some of our audience would have heard me say this, if you want A player results, you have to have A players. The B and C team just won't do. But not only that, you have to be an A player as an employer, because A players aren't going to work for B and C employers. Yeah. And it reminds me of a lot of the research I've done around visionary leaders in my academic work. Visionaries are A players, and they only hire A players, but they do the same thing as what you're talking about. They sell the vision, they sell the dream, and then they back it up with the tangibles, right? The contingent rewards. Think about this. Are you guys iPhone people? Yeah.
Guilty.
Okay, I'm the only Android.
Oh, boo.
Yeah, and I've been an Android, and actually, as much as I know about Steve Jobs and how much I've written about him, I actually just bought my first iPad last week. I had my leadership development group. We had our spring retreat, and I took them to one of the local malls, and we stopped in as part of our recon we do on our retreats. We stopped in at the Eddie Bauer store. And why would you stop at the Eddie Bauer store at the mall, right? I mean, most malls don't even have an Eddie Bauer anymore. I mean, we're all middle aged, so you remember back in the day when Eddie Bauer was the thing, right? I mean, there was an Eddie Bauer Ford, I think it was an Explorer, right?
And the headrest.
You see, yeah. Did you have one?
No.
No. Yeah.
Wanted one though.
Right. You wanted one, right? Oh, it's so cool, right? Now, well, back in the 90s, Eddie Bauer, of course, was a premium brand. And this whole staffing thing is so important to this story because Steve Jobs was looking for an A player to head up the development of the Apple Store. And he interviewed a guy named Ron Johnson, and the first interview he shared his vision for this idea. Now, the board didn't want the Apple Store at all. They saw all of these computer stores going out of business. I mean, Gateway was shutting down. There was CompUSA, which was where the Apple computers were, but they were all the way in the back of the store, and nobody got to it because the commission sales guys weren't going to sell the Apple computers. So Jobs said, if Apple, this is what he told Ron Johnson, if Apple is going to succeed, it has to win on innovation. And it can't win on innovation unless it has a way to communicate with its customer. And so he's sharing this in this first interview, right? So this is the interview, right? He's sharing the vision of why this is essential. This role is essential for the success of Apple. It's a pretty big statement, right? In an interview. This is what you're talking about, selling it, right? Mm-hmm. But check this out. So he has the first interview, and Johnson's interested. Second interview, they don't have it in the office. They leave. They go to the Stanford Mall, 140-acre mall, and they go and they walk the mall from 8:30 in the morning and back and forth. They stop at the Eddie Bauer store. And they sit in front of the Eddie Bauer store, and they say all the things that they love and hate about it. And the things that they didn't like about it was that it just it had two entrances. It seemed busy. It was not inviting. It was not open. So Johnson then starts giving Jobs ideas about what a store might look like that would represent Apple. Open, warm, super cool, windows everywhere, the finest material, very little clutter, right? A place where people can interact and get to know Apple. And they agreed that people would not necessarily drive 5 or 10 miles to see an Apple computer, but they would walk a few minutes into a store. And that's how they would begin to grab the PC users and ultimately convert them into Apple users. It was not only essential, but it turned out to be one of the best moves Apple could make, because eventually Apple stores, is there a CompUSA store anymore?
I don't think so.
No. I mean, just go down the list, right? Gateway's gone, all the other ones. I think Best Buy is pretty much the only big box retailer left that does electronics, besides all the Apple stores. And Apple is reported to have more people coming into their stores than all the people that go into all 4 Disney parks on an annual basis in Orlando. That's how many people come in and out of those Apple stores. And did Ron Johnson get the job? Yes. Did he want the job? Yes. And that's, I think, about what you're talking about. I mean, that's a philosophy of one individual, but I think that we have to reframe our understanding of how we draw people in to being a part of game changing, whatever it is, that why ever we're in business. And if we're not bought in to making real change for our end user, our customer, our stakeholder, then a potential hire is going to see it in our eyes. we've got to have the fire and the passion. And I think that's a big part of what you're talking about. And I think that employers need to get on the bus about not only believing in what they do and communicating that effectively, but also explaining to the potential new hire how they are a part of that change and how excited they are for them to be involved in this organization. How often do you see that? Just lay it out. Is this now when me explaining that, is it 10%? Is it 50%? Is it 80%?
We don't always see behind the curtain during the interviews, but I think we could probably speculate based on, it's hard to put a percentage on, but I think that there's, IT is kind of an introverted space where there's very smart thinkers and where their best aptitude is not necessarily, or their best characteristics aren't necessarily communication. Sometimes they're a lot better at writing complex code and things that 3 sales guys in a room could never do. So I don't know how well that is articulated from an IT standpoint. That is a great question. I think there's certainly people involved in interviews, that we know through our customers that are like, I hope this guy talks to the candidate or this lady talks to the candidate because we know that they will sell them. Yeah. They're the closer. We know who they are. But then also in the IT world, it's valuable for the super techie person to talk techie with that person too. So they know that like their technology needs and wants and keeping up with trends and ahead of the curve things are there too. So from a percentage standpoint, I don't know that we get access to that information because we don't sit on those interviews. But I think we know from a just conversational piece that there's certain people that can help close that. And in each one of our our clients or teams that are interviewing within our clients, like I think for whoever hears this podcast today, just to be mindful of whenever there's that person we know we need to have the right people involved. As we would talk like in sales meetings and from our perspective and how we'd relate to that is that there might be a meeting that I have that I'm like, I need to have Brian here with me for this one because there's going to be something he's going to be able to add value to that I can't, that might help me get this one over the edge, or I need to have Jim here for this one. So yeah, it's hard to put a percentage on it, but I certainly think I get what you're saying. And it's just,
if I'm guessing, it's less than 50%.
Yeah.
But I would say overwhelmingly, we know it when we see it. I have had more candidates this year agree that the position may pay slightly less than other jobs they could get, but they want it because of who they would work for. Emphatically. I don't care that it's $5,000 less, $8,000 less on base salary. I want to work for that person, for that company. And when it happens, it's beautiful. The other ones seem a little more commoditized. Yeah, there's 5. This one's okay. Yeah, you want them to be passionate and excited about taking the job. And when it's there, it's really cool. Why it doesn't happen more is kind of that mystery that we're trying to help solve and or communicate that it needs to be there.
I think a lot of it's perception. We're submitting candidates to apply for a job at a client that the candidate doesn't know anything about. We've gone full disclosure, tell them everything they know about the company. Here's their website. Here's our relationship, blah, blah, blah. So I think it's more perception that the client's like, oh, this person's applying to interview at our job. So like they should be thankful. Maybe not. I'm just kind of looking at like, we got to the point where you should really sell your opportunity to the candidate just as much as the candidate selling themselves to you, right? I mean, it's should go 50-50 both ways. It's the ones that, think they're the Apples and the Amazons where people are lined up around the block to work there. And it's like, no,
right.
And it's both ways. I mean, we could go all day.
But
examples, we could literally go all day.
But you've hired people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're hiring, so you guys are professional staffers, right? So when you're hiring people, how do you approach that? What do you talk about?
Well, our motivation is high. So this is our business and our livelihood, and we jumped off the cliff. And so we are extremely passionate about it. Where, you work at a company with 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 employees. They're a manager, but I don't know that they have the same vested interest as us. There was things we loved about our history and professional history and things that we might want to tweak or change. So, I think when we hire and we talk to people, things that are important to us are some of the battle scars we have along the way that we want to make sure aren't in our culture and our environment. But really, we're looking for what we see, our big picture and where this thing is headed is make sure that anyone that wants to come join us also can visualize that picture and where we're going, and if they want to be a part of it. We're a small company. It's hard to compete with larger staffing companies with nicer offices and things. We're a small shop. We got a small office. Building our client base, there's a lot of things that may not be attractive to people starting in staffing or coming out of college and want to get into sales. But where we're headed, none of us doubt where we're going is great and where we have already accomplished in a short period of time. So it's important for me that anybody knows, like, hey, we're very passionate about the growth and what we're doing and the culture we're building. And if I can't tell you're excited about that, you're not gonna work here. I mean, you need to be excited. You need to see the vision. You have to be behind it. And by the way, we want to offer a ton of cool bells and whistles and fun things out of office and things that, to keep this thing low stress in a stressful world and stressful industry, to make it attractive for them too. So it's double-sided, but people that are excited about a vision and where we're going, and we try to articulate that as a startup, essentially,
Yeah. I would contend that if you can even build a 10, 20, 30,000 employee business that has buy-in for the vision and why you do what you do, I would argue that you can develop management with that level of committed passion as well. I mean, look at what Elon's doing. Look at SpaceX and Tesla, right?
And Twitter.
And now Twitter, right? But it's top down. I guess the point I'm making, right? It's top down. And that's what leadership is, right? People are always watching the leader to see, is the leader vested? Is the leader passionate? Because that energy is contagious, whether it's low or high. And we are the ones that we hold it in our hands, whether or not we can create, like you said, all of you have mentioned the word culture, that culture that is on fire and stays on fire. So what do you guys have to say about that? How do you like to interview?
I mean, kind of go off what Matt was saying. We want to see, for me personally, I want to see, because it can be very fruitful from a financial standpoint in the staffing industry. It's a simple model of how you get there, but it's, because we all three, I think, we started way before Stride. I'm just saying in general, our former employer, very motive financially. I mean, everything looks cool company, culture, which is what we've created, but not that I expect everyone to make super amount of money, but at least kind of have a goal, have some, I want to see some type of self-driven goals throughout the interview in a candidate. If we're talking to someone, obviously fitting in, we've created an amazing culture that the last thing we'll ever do is disrupt that. But there's just a couple little nuances and pieces that I look for personally.
Yeah.
But we're all three pretty in agreement of.
I think hiring for yourself is the hardest, right? We've all hired thousands of people for other clients, right? This person's perfect. We know it. We sent over with confidence, and someone sitting right in front of you that you're going to hire and pay their paycheck and benefits. And it's a lot more stress, and you just don't want to get it wrong. And, we've in prior companies hired people that we knew were going to be rock stars that turned out to not be very good, and people that didn't interview well that ended up being great. So it's a very imperfect science. And for me, a lot of it's kind of gut feel of, do we like them? Will they fit in? Do they embody a lot of the same values and morals and just determination and want to help us grow and do something really cool? And, throw degrees and all the other stuff kind of out the window. It really is just about, does it feel good? Does it fit? And if it does, we'll teach them everything they don't know,
Yeah. Well, you guys are three awesome dudes. I would imagine that everyone that comes into your camp that's a fit would love to work for you. And that's That's a compliment that I mean. And you got that cool merch too. I'm peeping the merch, Brian. Got the Stride merch.
Stride
Can I
gear
get some of that
coming.
merch? How do I get some of that?
Hey, we got some on order.
We've got an order coming. Order coming.
As we close, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd love for you to just take a moment, think about it, and answer for it. At one day, as entrepreneurs, as family men, as leaders, we'll be at the great summit of life, right at the very end. And as you're looking back at everything you'd accomplished, every life you've touched, what's one thing that you would want others to have said about you?
We got to answer that on the spot.
Yep. It's a tough one.
Personally and professionally, in general. I'd like to think they just say I was a good guy and respectful. It's the oldest cliche out there, but treat people the way you'd want to be treated. I don't know.
That's good.
It's
Yeah. I hope that everybody that comes in contact with me feels that I've added something to their life and they're better for having that relationship. Personally, professionally, any of that.
Come on, brother. Bring us home.
Man,
That's a big one.
a doozy.
I it's tough. I guess just off the top, someone that people want to be around and just like and trust and challenge people at the right times and maybe pat them on the back on the others. I kind of tie that into parenthood and other things, but it's hard to say, one word, but that's a tough one. Let me think about it.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to have you. I'm going to have
Catch
to
you on
have
the
you
next
back
one.
on another show.
Catch you on the next one.
We'd love it.
I've had so much fun enjoying our time together. I know that we've helped some people out there today, and I'm just thankful to know you guys and be a part of your journey. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having us.
This was great.
Thanks,
It was
Nate.
Insightful and it was fun.
Awesome.